The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good morning. Good evening. I'm Jeff Barnett. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. Today we have a special guest. Mark Levine usually sits in this chair. Tonight, he's going to be answering the questions that I'm going to pose to him. If anybody wants to call in, please do so. We'll be taking calls on the line. Mark, it's a very obvious first question that I have to ask you.
Yes.
Congress's approval ratings are down in single digits.
That's true.
Why in the world do you want to run for the U.S. Congress?
I think we can improve those numbers. I actually think it's easier now to improve those numbers than ever. We do have a completely dysfunctional Congress. And the reason we have that is because we got Democrats and Republicans fighting on the same old messages, and they're not agreeing, and you have Republicans, the party of no, and you have too many Democrats who aren't working hard enough to defend Democratic vision, aren't progressive vision. So I think we need an aggressive progressive to get out there. The American dream is slipping away. It used to be that children did better than their parents,
right.
That my grandparents did better than their great-grandparents. My dad did better than my grandparents. It's all about education and achieving. And now what do we find? We find kids, they get an education in college, and they're saddled with loans, and they're going back and living at home with their parents, and they can't find a job. They're actually moving in reverse. The American dream is going back in reverse. So one of the things I would want to do, for example, is subsidize student loans again. We used to, under the GI Bill, we used to take all the people who came back from World War II and give them a chance to go to college. Today, what we're doing is we're actually, as college costs go up, the money going for student loans is going down. We have to give kids a chance to succeed in college. One of the things they're doing, by the way, almost half of all the college graduates today, newly college graduates, are working in jobs that don't even require a degree. So we're moving backwards. And then in this district, people understand how the contributions of federal workers and contractors and military veterans. But in Washington, across the river, what are they doing? They're the first to take it on the chin. The first people they hit, workers, federal workers and contractors and military veterans. Retirees. Another thing, people are always talking about, oh, well, should we cut the rate in Social Security? Not only should we not cut Social Security, we can expand Social Security. There are aggressive, progressive ideas that nobody's talking about in Washington. It's really very easy to do. We simply make millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, and suddenly we have all the money Social Security could possibly need, so that nobody, basic rule, nobody who works hard and plays by the rules should live in poverty in America. No one.
When you
That's
said
the American dream.
When you said aggressive, progressive,
yes.
that is a fascinating concept. Because when I think about it, a lot of the duties of a congressman today are not just dealing with the other members of the House. It's dealing with the constituents that work for those members,
right,
and with the interest groups, and
right.
Getting that word out. And that seems to be a key theme of what you're talking about.
It is, and also going over everyone's heads and talking to the media. Because, for example, when the Republicans shut the government down, 3 years ago, they threatened to shut the government down. They said, Barack Obama, if you don't give us our tax compromise, we're going to shut the government down, we're going to default on the national debt. At that time, I came on this show, I pulled out my Constitution, and I read Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, which said the validity of the public debt shall not be questioned. In other words, Obama should have said, make my day. We're not defaulting on the national debt. You disagree, you take me to court. That would have made the Republicans look awful. He didn't need to compromise. He did compromise. I went on Bill O'Reilly's show that night, and I said Barack Obama, the president, didn't need to compromise. Fast forward, what just happened a few months ago? The Republicans did shut the government down, and the American people blamed them. They don't like parties that shut the government down. And now, last week or 2 weeks ago, when it came to expanding the national debt ceiling, the Republicans did nothing.
Right.
Barack Obama stood firm. The Democrats stood firm. The Republicans walked away. We need an aggressive progressive. We need to fight back. Too many Democrats let them set the terms of the debate. For me, the terms of the debate are the American dream. They're equal opportunity. They're achieving more than your parents did. All these great American ideals, you could even call them conservative because they were around in the 1950s. But we are moving backwards. It used to be that the middle class, when they got to be more productive, and they've been more productive every single year since the 1930s, since we've kept these records, that the middle class got richer, the working class got richer, and the rich got richer too. Today, all of those funds go to the top 1%. I'm just saying let workers of the middle class get a little bit back from their hard work. That's not radical, but today it's considered aggressive.
And during the Clinton years, everybody made money.
That's right.
Everybody
the rich,
made
the poor,
money.
the middle class. Everybody made money. Not anymore.
You mentioned Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
We have a great clip that's got Bill O'Reilly on it. I think our viewers would like to watch.
Sure. This is my compilation, my demo reel, right?
Well.
The one on my website. Let's play it.
Take your best shot. Where did I go wrong in my analysis?
Well, the first thing you did going wrong was you compared the federal income tax burden to the entire tax burden. That's a common conservative mind trick. But middle class and poor people pay more Social Security taxes as a percentage of their income than the rich.
Now, you're a liberal guy, Mr. Levine. Your audience might not know you,
am.
but you were on program a couple of times, smart guy.
Liberals believe that blacks are people and therefore are protected under the 14th Amendment. Conservatives believe that corporations are people. Now, liberals say corporations aren't human beings. They're not people.
Here's Mark. Mark's looking at his Constitution.
Always know we've hit stride when Mark pulls out his Constitution.
That's right. Immigration is a federal standard. It is federal standard according to the Constitution. Flash my Constitution. I respect the law and I respect the Constitution.
We know. I mean, how many people walk around with it in their pocket?
It is. I got it right here. I got my Constitution out. I happen to have my Constitution right here.
Get out your Constitution, Shep.
I've got it right here.
Hey, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes to provide for the general welfare of the United States. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No one's taking away anyone's militia rights. But apart from a militia, it seems to me that instead of having judicial activists determine what guns you can have and what guns you shouldn't have, we should rely on the elected representatives of the people. The healthcare bill is not a budget buster, it's a budget booster. Don't use the loaded term socialist. I don't think Canadians are necessarily smarter than Americans. Sure. They get better care at half the cost.
Yeah, oh, please.
We need a combination of socialism and capitalism. That's why we have Social Security. That's why we have Medicare. Bill, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's authoritarian that the government taxes you to pay for the police force? That the government taxes you to pay
They have the
for
right in the
firefighters?
Constitution to levy taxes.
They do?
Yep.
But wait, I may not use the police force.
Doesn't
I may
matter.
not use the firefighters.
They have the right in the
force
Constitution.
me to buy something
Mr. Levine,
I don't need.
You asked a very good question, and I'll give you an excellent answer. Don't have the right to force me to buy something.
You're buying health care. Health care is for everyone. Look, a lot of states force you to buy
Healthcare is
car
for
insurance.
everyone. I'm sure
That's
there are
right.
people out there going, I don't want it. I don't want it. See,
Everybody lives or dies, Bill. Everybody needs health care.
There are bad apples in every business environment.
Which is why you need government regulation to ferret them out.
There, you and I will agree.
All right.
Okay? You need the government. You need the government.
Both want to beef up the SEC.
Huh?
All right.
Well, I'm not sure you agree on that completely.
Conservatives will tell you all the time, government is not the answer. Let the private industry do it. Leave Wall Street alone, and then they ruin the economy. Leave the oil companies alone, and then they ruin the Gulf. What people are learning is that government regulation is often necessary. You can't trust the corporations to police themselves. You agree, Mike?
What I disagree strongly with is, yes, if the government was so all-powerful and responsive, why haven't they stopped the leak?
Now you want the government.
Let the
newly
let
minted
the private
socialists,
sector-
Mike Gallagher and Bobby Jindal. Now they want the government.
So I'm not a quiet person.
Social Security, Citizens United, immigration, guns, health care, Wall Street, and Guantanamo.
And don't forget oil spill and companies and pollution. That was all in 3 minutes. You should see my longer reel.
And do you have your copy of the Constitution?
I got it right here. I got it right here.
So take one of these. We've got a few minutes before the first break. Social Security. Talk about that.
Social Security is fascinating because Republicans keep saying it's running out of money when actually it has a massive surplus. In fact, the only part of our government that has this massive surplus. And Social Security could be solvent for more than 100 years, and we can actually increase benefits with one simple tweak. Right now, 94% of Americans pay 6.2% of their income into Social Security. And they probably think that everyone does because that's what they do. But if you make more than $117,000 a year, listen up folks if you don't, if you make more than that, you don't pay 6.2%. A millionaire...
You get up to the cap.
That's right. A millionaire pays less than 1%. A 10 millionaire pays less than 1/10 of 1%, and a billionaire pays less than 1,000th of 1%. Now, we hear Republicans all the time talking about a flat tax. In Social Security, it is a regressive tax. poor people pay more. If the 6% of Americans simply paid the same rate that everyone else did, if Donald Trump paid the same rate that his janitor pays, we've got so much money in Social Security that not only is it solvent as far as the eye can see for way more than 100 years, we can increase benefits so that no senior citizens live in poverty.
And this isn't
it's
a
amazing
radical
we can do
idea
this.
because we already do that.
For 94% of Americans.
And for Medicaid and for Medicare.
Yes, that's true.
And that's a standard that there's no cap on that.
That's exactly right. So it's just do it the same for Social Security, and we have so much money coming into the system, and it just treats every American the same. All we have to ask is rich people to make the same sacrifice that middle class and poor people do. The people who are struggling are making the sacrifice, and the people with the gold toilet seats aren't. Doesn't make sense to me.
Citizens United.
But I can tell you one more thing about that. Before you go on, I don't know any Democrat talking about that. Maybe Elizabeth Warren has, and if she has, God bless her, I love Elizabeth Warren. We don't see the majority of Democrats talking about it. None of my opponents, as of yet, and I hope they copy me, have talked about expanding Social Security, lifting the cap and making sure that we can increase benefits so that no senior lives in poverty. I hope they join me on this.
What kind of benefits do you want to increase on Social Security?
Basically, the seniors living in poverty. So we have some people who are seniors, retirees, frankly, are doing fine. They're getting what they put in, and that's all fine. But I'm talking about the ones that are struggling. Social Security, for many people, pays $13,000, $15,000, sometimes $20,000 a year. Sometimes that's below the poverty level. And so the people who are struggling, but it's not just retirees. Disability, right? Social Security is an insurance payment. Right. It's not. People think it's a retirement plan. It's not. In fact, sadly enough, today with no pensions anymore, it seems whether on the federal level or in private industry, people are relying increasingly solely on Social Security. So it definitely is for the elderly, but it's also for disability. It's also if parents die young and leave young children. Paul Ryan's parents died young, and Social Security provided for him. He wasn't a senior, to be sure. Social Security is that great insurance program that says that no matter what happens to you, if you get hit by a car, if the stock market goes down and you lose all your earnings there, if your parents die young, or if you live too long, you are protected. It's the last bit of the social contract. And here's something I always say. When Republicans, when they tried to privatize Social Security and they wanted to make each of us basically just care for ourselves and not care for everyone else, and they wanted to make sure that our fortunes rose or fall with the stock market, I said the one thing they didn't like about Social Security is they wanted to be antisocial and insecure. Right. In other words, they hate it.
And Social Security is one of those few programs where the government does force us to buy it.
That's right.
Because people historically did not prepare for their own retirement.
Right. At the time of the Great Depression, the vast
and it's
majority
kind of a single-payer system.
That's right.
So that is something that's analogous to Obamacare, which we'll probably talk about in our next segment.
I'd love to.
We've got to take a break, but again, this is the Inside Scoop. We're talking with congressional candidate Mark Levine, resident of Alexandria.
Alexandria, Virginia.
For how long, Mark?
For 13 years.
And
love it there.
And what do you do?
I used to do TV and radio, but now I'm running for Congress, Jeff.
Okay. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing, no? 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi, I'm Jeff Barnett. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We're here with congressional candidate Mark Levine. We were just talking to Mark about his bio before we had a break. Mark is a graduate of Harvard undergrad and JD from Yale.
Please don't hold that against me.
No, President Kennedy once said that he had a similar background and he had the advantage of a Harvard education and a Yale degree.
The irony is I'm about to attack my own education, because one of the things I think the government should do is make public schools, particularly state schools, less expensive. I'd love to see, one of my big issues is student loans and making sure that students can afford college. And one of the best ways to do that was, back in my father's day, was actually to make it cheaper and easier to go to college, because the federal government would subsidize kids going to state schools. So that probably wouldn't apply to Harvard and Yale. They have a big endowment, they can handle themselves. So
do you think the whole internet college movement is going to have an effect on college costs long term?
You know, it's interesting. I hope so. The problem, of course, is that you never know what you're going to get on the internet. There are some very respectable professors and so forth. There's also a lot of junk on the internet. And so I would hope we'd have some kind of accreditation to find out what's good and what's junk. But I do think college costs are way too high. And I think one of the reasons why they're going up so much is because the federal government basically subsidizes anyone at any cost. What I'd like to see is them negotiate with colleges to get those costs down, just the way the Canadian government does with Medicare. They keep their drug prices down. We don't do this with Medicare, and we need to. That's one of the big things we need to do. But use the power of the federal government to say, you want aid? You want student aid to this college? All right, don't charge more than a certain amount. Let's keep those costs down.
You mentioned Medicare, so let's talk about health care a little bit.
Okay.
Let's get into Obamacare.
Let's do it.
So
we'll get back to my bio later.
Were you a fan of Obamacare at the beginning? Are you now? How do you see it moving forward?
I think it's a step forward. I don't think it goes far enough.
Right.
That's what I've thought about it from the beginning. The best program we have that takes care of Americans today is called Medicare. And 94% of people on Medicare like their Medicare. Now, Medicare is not perfect either. I just talked about the fact that Medicare needs to negotiate drug prices down. The Canadians pay 1/3 of what we do, because their government stands up for them and actually negotiates prices down. Our government doesn't stand up for people on Medicare. So Medicare can be improved, but notwithstanding that, Medicare has a 3% overhead cost. In other words, of all the money that goes to the Medicare system, government employees, they work very hard. I just told you about hardworking federal employees. They take only 3%, 97% goes out to beneficiaries, compared to the private health plans. The best charge 10%. Most charge 15%. Some charge over 25%. One of the good things that Obamacare does, Affordable Care Act,
puts a cap.
That's right, it puts a cap. If they try to make more than 25% in profits, they've got to give some back to the people. So obviously, I believe in universal health care. I want to see a system like they have in Canada or England or France or New Zealand or Australia or 35 industrialized nations. Every wealthy nation on earth has universal health care. And what you do is you get sick, you go to the doctor of your choice, and when it comes time to pay, you say thank you very much and you go home, because you don't pay anything. It's all taken care of. What a relief that would be. You wouldn't have to keep a job because of health care. Right. And the other thing is, it's much cheaper.
Or you wouldn't be trapped in a particular job.
That's what I mean to say.
You know, the term is job lock, where you can't move out.
I had a good friend that actually, she had to have hip surgery, and she took a job that she hated just so she could be there a year, so she'd get her necessary hip surgery and then leave it. So what they do in all these countries is they pay, on average, half of what we pay. Actually, many pay less than half of what we pay. They all pay less than we do, and they all live longer. Every one of their countries has a higher life expectancy than Americans. Even Costa Rica, not the richest country on earth despite its name, Costa Rica. I mean, this is a Latin American country. It's a great country, but it's hardly a very wealthy country. They have universal health care. Their citizens live longer than we do, and they pay much less. What does Costa Rica know the United States doesn't know? Not to mention Canada and Europe and Australia and New Zealand. Universal health care is the answer. So that's the gold standard. That's what I'm pushing for in Congress. And there's an easy way to do it. We don't need all these complex bells and whistles. I would have the simplest health care bill in America. I take the Medicare bill, and everywhere it says 65, I scratch it out. And now, everyone gets Medicare, whether you're 55, 45, 35, or 25. And let me think about what this does. Let's say you're 25, all right? You pay into the system as part of Medicare, you pay your premiums, but you're unlikely to use it. If you get hit by a car, you get cancer, you get leukemia, you'll need the health care, you've got it. You're less likely to use it. That makes Medicare more solvent. It actually brings more money into the system and everybody's covered. It's a win, 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 win. So that's the best solution. All right. The Affordable Care Act is a good solution. It's not the best solution, but it does for the first time allows tens of millions of Americans who could not get health care, it allows them to get health care. There's a guy from Kentucky called into my radio show, and I've been telling his story a lot. Gary from Kentucky was in a small town in Appalachia. His factory closed where he worked most of his life. And this guy, really hard worker, he would strip the leaves off tobacco plants. And he made $7,000 something a year doing that, and another $4,000 a year going through garbage to find a place to recycle. Most of the people have left his small town in eastern Kentucky. 48-year-old guy. And he got a hernia. He needed health care. He could not afford it. He could not get Medicaid because you can't get Medicaid unless you have children. There's very strict things before the Affordable Care Act. With the Affordable Care Act, now he can get Medicaid. And this guy, who was from a really conservative area of a pretty red state, is now a true blue Democrat and is singing the praises because this guy could finally, for the first time in his life, get health care. Now, Gary is a hard worker. Gary lifts 100-pound tobacco leaves. Gary's no slouch. It's not his fault that he was earning $11,000 a year. And the main thing I want to get across in this campaign, what I do on my radio show and TV show, what I do on Fox News, is Fox News and the Republicans have this ridiculous and offensive idea that if you're poor, you're lazy. That if you're in the middle class, you just haven't tried hard enough. That if you're working 3 jobs and raising a family, you're somehow a bad American, or what Mitt Romney might call the 47%.
If you're not rich, it's your fault.
That's right. And we know that's wrong. We know that the vast majority of working class and middle class people are struggling. They're struggling harder and they're falling farther behind. Now there's 2 wage earners and they're not doing as good as they did when there was 1 wage earner. So I'm sorry, that's an affront to the American people, but that's that narrative, and they do it subtly and they do it openly, and they make it clear if you're not filthy rich, you must be some kind of sloucher. And the dirty secret is that if you are the child of someone very rich, or the great-great-grandchild of the Waltons or something like that, you can have billions of dollars and never worked a day in your life. So I believe in a meritocracy. I believe you work hard, you play by the rules, you should be rewarded. Yeah. And it's offensive to talk about poor people as somehow slouchers.
If you mentioned the Waltons, of the 10 richest people in America, 4 are heirs to the Walton.
Right. It's more than $100 billion for those 4 people.
Right. And about a third of their workforce is earning minimum wage.
That's right. And the question is, what are these Walton kids doing? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to disparage them personally, but my point is this. They and their kids and their grandkids and their great-great-great-grandkids will never have to work a day in their life. And contained in my Constitution is also the Declaration of Independence. And it talks about going up against a monarchy, going up against dukes and earls and this inherited nobility that would never have to work a day in their life. They just were the Earl of Shropshire or whatever, and the child of the Earl of Shropshire. And we don't believe in a class system in America. At least I don't think we do. We don't believe in a caste system, and we are becoming that. We're becoming a system where there are even candidates in this race who have voted to end the estate tax. Again, that's offensive. What the estate tax does is it protects hardworking people. It says, you know what, you get several million from your parents, but then we get a tax stuff over that because you should have to work hard. We shouldn't have this inherited nobility forever. We should give the 6-year-old girl who's living in the ghetto and a single-parent family, she may have the cure for cancer, but she's got to eat, she's got to have shelter, she's got to have an education so she learns it, and then she may just grow up and have the cure for all of us. But if we don't give her a chance, we'll never have that.
Yeah, when George Steinbrenner died, it was that time period where the estate tax lapsed in Congress.
Yeah, for 1 year. Ridiculous.
And as a result, his billions moved to his heirs tax-free.
Right. And look, I'm not against rich people. There's some very good rich people. We've, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett certainly give a lot of their money away. But I think $10 million is a lot of money. That's what the estate tax is already. And you still get more, 50% tax above that. That should be enough for you to have your little nest egg if you don't work a day in your life. Remember, if they work, and let's face it, if you are the kid of wealthy parents, you not only get to go to very good schools, you even sometimes get to buy justice. I mean, there's a reason why O.J. Simpson got off, and a lot of people who are not guilty get put in prison if you can't afford a high-priced lawyer. So justice is determined on the basis of money. Healthcare, people live or die on the basis of how much money they have. I find that offensive in a document that says all men are created equal, even if the people who wrote it didn't accord women or slaves equality. To me, America is all about working hard, playing by the rules, and achieving the American dream. And that's what I see dying, and that's why I'm running for Congress.
You talk about the estate tax again. $10 million is the ceiling. If you put $10 million into a tax-free bond, you would get at 4%, which are available. You would get a $400,000 check each year.
That's a lot of money.
Tax-free, without
ever working a day in your life.
Right.
And then they call poor people lazy. Then what they complain about is, I think there's food stamp fraud. Food stamp, you get $6 a day to eat. Now, if some poor person is stealing someone else's food stamps, I'm against that. I'm against all kind of fraud. But they're increasing their food budget from $6 a day to $12 a day. And that's the one that the Fox News of the world, they're complaining about, while Wall Street billionaires, steal millions, and coal companies and pollute the environment and grab tons of money, and oil companies. Corporations are stealing billions, and they're complaining because some person gets a little bit more than macaroni and cheese. I just think, here's my view. If someone steals $1, it's bad, but if someone steals $1 million, it's 1,000,000 times worse. That's my view.
Great point. You talk about poverty. Immigration plays there. So we got a couple of minutes left.
Sure.
Immigration is a hot issue, not only for how you deal with today's immigrants, but what are we going to do now so this problem doesn't reveal itself?
My view is really simple. When I think of the American dream, I think of immigrants. What's the most famous statue in America, right? The Statue of Liberty. Emma Lazarus, give me your tired, your poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free. My great-grandparents were immigrants, and they came here with $20. I know that because I've looked at the Ellis Island Manifest. Their total net wealth was $20. My great-grandfather was a peddler in Louisiana and Mississippi, and he finally got enough to afford a horse. And then he finally, by the time he died, he had 6 stores. That's the American dream. Every immigrant coming to this country is coming in for the same reason that my great-grandparents did. They want a better life. Maybe they're fearing religious persecution. Maybe they just want to live better, and they're coming from a corrupt country. And let's face it, Mexico is not the greatest country when it comes to how they treat their poor. Or maybe, whether you're a descendant of a slave or Native Americans, everyone is striving to have a better life here. And this idea that we're going to suddenly close our doors to the one thing that makes America great. We're the only nation on earth that is not based on an ethnicity. France, Germany, Mexico, you name it. China, every other nation on earth is based on the Chinese people and the Chinese population, and that's fine. But what makes America unique is we are from all over the world, and the one thing we have in common is the Constitution of the United States and the American dream. And if we start shutting our doors and shutting off the American dream, I think we shut off what it means to be American. We shut off the country that gave us everything from jazz to Chinese food to Hollywood to our culture, our food. We are the country that's the entire world coming together, trying to make a better life for ourselves. So yes, of course, I support helping all immigrants, whether it's the DREAM Act or becoming American citizens, to do what my great-grandparents did.
We're talking to the aggressive progressive. And Mark Levine is running for the United States Congress, and we will be back in about 2 minutes. And again, we're
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year, with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
Jeff Barnett, and we're back with the Inside Scoop, and we're back with Mr. Mark Levine, candidate for the U.S. Congress, the 8th Congressional District in Virginia. Mark, we were just talking about your bio. We talked about Harvard and Yale.
Right.
So how did you get to Virginia?
Okay, well, by way of Los Angeles, so that's probably not the most direct route. I was a trial lawyer in Los Angeles. I went to Yale Law School and I made a lot of money. I did what a lot of people do when you go to law school. I defended one corporation against another. It wasn't immoral work, but it wasn't particularly making this country a better place. So I would do a lot of citizen activism on the side. I was one of the founders of Marriage Equality California. We began that at a time when no gay couples in the world could get married. And actually, we had even gay groups tell us that we were being ridiculous, that this was a silly idea that gay couples could actually get married. Some of them even opposed us. I wrote the second civil unions bill in the nation, California's, right after Vermont. I did. Only mine went a lot further than Vermont's, because although we called it civil union because they had this proposition that said you couldn't call it marriage, I had in there full equality at the state and federal levels. The first challenge to the Defense of Marriage Act would have been in my California bill. Unfortunately, gay groups actually thought it went too far. They thought full equality was too much to ask for, and they made us pull the bill. So we did, but 10 years later in DC, I wrote a good part of that marriage equality bill working with Phil Mendelson, and that one not only became law across the river, but also I defended it in court when they tried to, pro bono, just when they tried to attack it. So I also did a lot of work to protect victims of domestic violence. So I did a lot of citizen activism. But what brought me here, to answer your question, was Bush v. Gore. Bush v. Gore changed my life. Bush v. Gore made me understand that if I just sit there and practice law and make money and just sort of watch what goes on and participate in electing Democrats, which I certainly did in California, that the United States Supreme Court might just grab the election, and even though the American people and the people of Florida voted for Gore, they're just going to give the election to Bush. I have to admit, I was naive. I did not think that could happen in America. I thought that could happen in Ukraine. I did not think that could happen in America, and it radicalized me. It made me realize I can't just sit there and practice law. I had to do something about it. So the Congressional Black Caucus hired me to draft the brief challenging the Florida electors, and on the floor of Congress, I'm proud of that brief. It did not succeed. Bush became president, but hopefully we embarrassed the United States Supreme Court enough that they'll never try to steal another election. So sometimes even when you lose, you can win. And then, of course, as you know, I came to work for Congressman Barney Frank. He was my mentor. I was his chief legislative counsel on the Hill. We worked on the Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security Committee, Financial Services Committee, and we did a lot of work. Everything from the first version of the Patriot Act, not the one that became law. I want to be very clear that Barney voted against that, but the first version would have protected civil liberties a lot more. I wrote a piece of that. I also played a major role in killing George Bush's faith-based initiative. On a longer program, I'll tell you, it actually was my conversation with Hillary Clinton, I think, was the linchpin in ending that, which would have allowed the government to discriminate on the basis of religion and race and sexual orientation. Really horrific stuff that George Bush was selling under this faith-based initiative, but really would have allowed for government jobs to discriminate, which I found horrific. And I persuaded Senator Clinton, and she persuaded the rest, and the rest is history. But I did a lot for Barney. One of the things Barney did is he ran a great office. He met with every constituent who wanted to meet with him. Every single one. I would do that in Congress. He answered every single letter. Now, sometimes the staff would write the letters and he would edit them, but he looked at every single one before it went out. That was constituent service. And I know Jim Moran is well known for his constituent service, so I'm going to talk to his people. I know Barney Frank's people. I definitely want to serve the people of the 8th Congressional District. We can do that. But I also want to change debate, and that's what Barney did. I mean, talk about an aggressive progressive. Barney Frank would get up there, and he would call out the Republicans, and they would scurry away and run away because they didn't want to challenge him. We need someone who goes on the national media and calls out and doesn't let them set the terms of debate. If the terms of the debate is Social Security is failing and how do we cut it, that's just the wrong thing to argue. The question is, why aren't millionaires paying their fair share of Social Security, and we have more money than the eye can see? You know, if they're going to say, should students pay 6% or 7%? And I say, no, let's subsidize student loans the way we did in the GI Bill. Let's take the terms of the debate away from them. Let's not talk about, oh, they're going to tax some carbon companies. Let's talk about the fact that coal companies are polluting our environment, and they're polluting our air, they're polluting our water, and they're getting away with it, and they're blowing up mountains. Do people want the Appalachian Mountains, the oldest mountains on Earth, to be a moonscape? Do they want this limited fossil fuel under the ground to serve us for a year, or do they want to really work on geothermal and wind and solar and other renewable energies? So I just think that an aggressive progressive has to take the debate away. And for the last 10 years, as you know, since I left Congressman Barney Frank, I've been on air, on the radio, on television, locally, nationally, internationally, being an aggressive progressive, going up with my Constitution against Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly and Sean Hannity. Rush Limbaugh called me, I forgot the word he used, a blooming idiot, a glittering jewel of colossal ignorance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very proud to have been insulted by a really horrible person. Oh, I didn't mince words there. I guess I'm the aggressive progressive. That's my bio in a nutshell. I could go on more, but that's the heart of how I got here.
Yeah, we've hit most of the real third rail type issues.
Okay, bring it on. Whatever you want to bring on.
Let's talk about choice.
Okay.
So don't just tell us your position, but tell us why.
I will. First of all, it's interesting. I think sometimes liberals get stuck in a mindset of they have to defend everything. For example, I think a woman has a right to choose under the Constitution, but I don't base it on Roe v. Wade, the 9th Amendment. I base it on the 4th Amendment. They have the same right, and I would absolutely defend a woman's right to choose. I just think it could be argued better. The Supreme Court doesn't always get things right. The 4th Amendment says that the right of people to be secure in their persons against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated and so forth unless you commit a crime. A woman has a right to be secure in her person. You cannot force a woman to cut off her arm or to get a tattoo. You cannot haul her away to jail unless she's committed a crime, unless there's probable cause, unless they have a warrant. The same goes with the most inviolate parts of her body. I just think it could be argued better. But so, I would argue in the 4th Amendment, a woman has a right to her person, a man has a right to his person, and she has the fundamental right to decide what she does with her own body. And one of the things that in America, 1/3 of all women live in poverty. It's an amazing statistic. 1/3 of all U.S. women live in poverty. And one of the main reasons is because women are having children when they don't want them or shouldn't have them, or maybe they're 16, or maybe they're in poverty and maybe they could wait. What birth control does, and obviously contraception is the better way to go about this, what contraception does, and I would have it easy to get, I'd have it free and accessible, is it allows people to delay childbearing until they can financially handle it, until some of my student loan programs and others kick in so that a woman can live the American dream, because you should have a child when that child can live a fulfilling, happy life. And one of the things that really concerns me about Republicans, they're talking all the time about the fetus. They love the fetus, but when it comes to children's health care, they're against it. When it comes to the state children's health insurance program, the majority of Republicans are against it. What is it about an embryo, about something, or a blastocyst, right? A sperm and egg coming together, smaller than the tip of your pen, that can't think, can't feel, has less brain capacity to an ant. Why does that cause Republican hearts to go aflutter, but they don't give a damn about a 2-year-old child who wants to eat, who needs food, who needs health care, who needs shelter? If every single child in America were cared for, if there were no foster homes, if we didn't have so many kids that we have to send them to Canada because we don't have enough people to taking them, if every child were cared for, and if you could create a child without using a woman's body, Matrix style, grow them in pods, then we can re-talk about abortion. But for now, because a woman's body's involved and because we haven't taken care of every child in America, that is a decision should be left up to a woman and to her doctor and whoever she wants to talk to about it, her husband, her family.
And then the last big third rail, gun control.
Gun control. I don't think it's as much of a third rail as they think. Democrats tell me, and I think they're wrong, we can't fight on gun control. We've lost this issue. We tried after Newtown, we tried background checks, we failed, we have to give up. And it's interesting because when Democrats give up and Republicans set the terms of the debate, the media goes along with it. I turn on the television, it seems every week. There's another, and it's always a young man, it seems. It's always some 20, 23-year-old young man who's mentally ill, who found it really, really easy to get a gun or two, and found it really easy to get an assault weapon that has a drum with hundreds of bullets or whatever it is. And well, a drum has 100 bullets, but they shoot up a mall. And they kill a bunch of innocent people. It just happened in Columbia, Maryland, as you remember. And people are like, oh, that's awful. And then you turn the channel. And then next week it's in Colorado, and it's in Arizona, and it's in Connecticut, and it's all across the country. And people act like, well, there's nothing you can do about insane people getting guns. That is insane. And when you look at the statistics, 90% of Americans support background checks. That's not only 98% of Democrats, that's 75% of Republicans and 85% of independents. 80% of gun owners support background checks. The majority, this is my favorite statistic, the majority of members of the National Rifle Association support background checks. And Democrats are giving up on this issue? This is ridiculous. I have asked people to come on my show, and I get Tea Party people come on my show. And I say, so tell me why you think an insane person should own a gun. I don't think an insane person should own a gun. Why do you think a schizophrenic, someone hearing voices, who thinks everyone's out to kill him, why do you want to give him a semi-automatic machine gun? I don't want to do that. You don't, but you don't support background checks. No, because I'm afraid if they start with background checks, they're going to start confiscating all our guns. And I say, well, I just asked you about background checks. I don't support gun confiscation unless you're a criminal or something like that, or a terrorist. I just asked you about background. Well, there's a slippery slope. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just agree on background checks. Because if you don't agree with me on background checks, what you're saying is, I want mentally ill people to own guns. And you're not willing to say that. Just speak with me. Mentally ill people, they never say, I want a mentally ill person to own a gun. Nor do they say that I want terrorists to own a gun. We have people on a terrorist watch list that aren't allowed to fly on planes. They're not even if they don't have any bombs with them, we don't let them fly on planes. Because I guess we're afraid they're gonna overpower someone. But we let them have guns, we let them have Uzis and Glocks, we let them have, these massive weapons. So I say to them, why do you think that an Al-Qaeda member of the United States should own a gun? And they say, well, I don't think that, but your policies support that. We have to bring back this issue. I am tired of Democrats caving in. I'm tired of Democrats saying we can't win on this issue. This is an issue on which 90% of Americans agree with us. If 90% isn't enough, then you should resign from Congress and get another job. Because this is something that's popular, that we have support on. And one last thing, just real quick. The one thing they always bring up, they bring up the Second Amendment. I got to go there. Yeah. Because they say, well, the Second Amendment says that every insane person gets to own a gun. Every terrorist gets to own a gun. No, it doesn't. And of course, I have a wonderful clip of Bill O'Reilly where I read to him the Second Amendment, which says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, the Supreme Court, about 5 years ago, said, we're going to ignore the whole first half of this. We're going to take the first half of this and pretend like our founders never wrote it. We're going to disobey our oath to uphold the Constitution and pretend that half of this amendment doesn't exist. And I say, if you pretend that the Constitution doesn't exist, you shouldn't be a Supreme Court justice. If Justice Scalia doesn't know what a well-regulated militia means, he shouldn't have this. And the answer is very simple. National Guard, well-regulated militia, they can have their guns, but not some insane person in a movie theater.
Excellent point. We're talking with Mark Levine, candidate for the United States Congress in the 8th District of Virginia, which is the Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, and sort of eastern Fairfax area. We'll be back in about 2 minutes, and we'll wrap up and really talk about the district in detail.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America, and reading is fundamental.
To the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi, I'm Jeff Barnett. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We're here talking with congressional candidate Mark Levine from the 8th District of Virginia. Can we bring up a map of the 8th District so people can get an idea?
There's one on my website. If you go to my website, levineforcongress.com, and you click on the map, it pops up just like that, and that purple tells you exactly where the district is. So, folks, if you want to know where you live in the 8th, just go to levineforcongress.com.
So it's anywhere from eastern McLean down Route 1, really, down to south of Fort Belvoir.
Right. So it's basically, it's Arlington and Alexandria and Falls Church in total. And the parts of Fairfax that are in the county, they're either within the Beltway, not everything within the Beltway, but most that's within the Beltway, or south of the Beltway all the way down to just the border of Woodbridge. That's exactly right.
And represented now by Jim Moran.
By Jim Moran, who's retiring after 24 years. That's correct. Jim Moran has served the district as an aggressive progressive. Although there's some places I actually think he wasn't progressive enough, and I would actually be to the left of Jim Moran. I'll just give you a quick example. The bankruptcy bill. One of the things that I got mad at Jim Moran for is when he voted for a bill that made it harder for middle-class people to declare bankruptcy. So 80% of all bankruptcies are related to health care.
Right.
It's usually people taking care of their own health or taking care of their parents' health, and that's not people who meant to lose all their life savings. It's people who are struggling and are desperate. And one of the things that Jim Moran did is he voted for a bill that would have made it harder, that does make it harder today, for people to get out from that credit card debt that they incurred in healthcare. So I disagree with Jim Moran on that. On most other issues, I think you'll find I'm solidly in agreement with him, whether it's on civil rights or a woman's right to choose or immigration or the American dream or unemployment. I just mentioned that one because I was asked by the Post where we differ, and I wanted to give that one because I do think he was wrong about that bill.
Another hot issue out there today, NSA, security versus privacy. How do you come down on there, Mr. Snowden? Where are we going? What can we do next?
If you looked at the opening of this clip, which has been my opening on the Inside Scoop for about at least 6 or 7 years now, maybe even longer. It may actually be 8 years. It says, the government is spying on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Have they read this document, which the president is sworn to uphold? When I show that clip, which begins every one of my shows, I was talking about President Bush. I wasn't talking about President Obama. I announced on this show, and I'm certainly not the only one in this country that knew, that the government was spying on 100 millions of Americans. Now, I didn't have the proof. I didn't work for the NSA. I didn't have the documents. But this was a known issue. So I'm glad that because of Edward Snowden, we're talking about it. I would say that we should have been talking about it before Snowden. And as far as Snowden concerned, I wish he'd done it a different way. I have had whistleblowers on my show. One of the issues that I had was an FBI cover-up of the connection between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists that I had. They show a little clip of it, and they covered it up not because they support these groups, but because the FBI made a mistake, and rather than expose their mistake, they just decided to stop investigating people who were threatening terrorist acts, which is, to me, the wrong way to go. Right. So I've exposed malfeasance in government wherever it comes from, but the person who brought this to my attention was Mike German, who was an agent who went undercover, great guy, pretended to be a white supremacist, and he found the FBI covering this up, and he went all the way through. He went through his boss and his boss's boss. He went all the way up to the director of the FBI when he wouldn't listen. He went to a senator on the Hill. He did it the right way. There are right ways to be a whistleblower. So I'm glad that Snowden wanted to be a whistleblower. I don't think he went about it the right way, but the issue he raises is much greater than Edward Snowden. The government has no right, and again, I'm just going to pull out my Constitution, which if you've seen, I do a lot. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution talks about the fact that you have the right to be secure in your persons, papers, and effects, which would include computers and phones and everything. And basically, if the government wants to spy on you, They have to have probable cause to believe you committed a crime. They have to go and get a warrant, and they have to particularly describe exactly what they're seizing. Now, this is the Fourth Amendment. This is part of the Bill of Rights. If the government doesn't like the Fourth Amendment, then bring it before Congress and the Constitution can be amended. Let's get rid of the Bill of Rights. Let's get rid of the Fourth Amendment. I think the founders were smarter than the Supreme Court or Congress seems to give them credit for, whether it's the Second Amendment or the Fourth Amendment. Whether it's a well-regulated militia, and I don't think anyone can think that an insane person with a gun is a well-regulated militia, or whether it's the fact that if we know someone's a terrorist, or we have even just probable cause to believe someone's a terrorist, go to a court, get that warrant, spy on them all you want. I'm fine with that, fine with that. But when you start spying on 200 million, 300 million Americans now, it was 200 million when I said that quote, if you spy on that many Americans, you're not particularly looking for anything. You're just grabbing up all the data. And I haven't seen any evidence that one terrorist or one criminal act was stopped by this massive, massive intervention into our privacy. So I opposed it under Bush. I continue to oppose it under Obama. To me, it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. It's a constitutional issue.
One point, though, as you say, this issue has been known for a long time.
Known by people who know. I talked about it on my show. There were a couple articles in the New York Times that I admit alerted me to it. The members of Congress certainly knew about it, but the public didn't talk about it. Until Snowden, you didn't hear, I dare say 90% of the American public had no idea they were being spied on. And that's not the way government should do things. If we have this policy, look, if we have a secret policy that is lawful, then fine. We're not going to tell the American people that we're spying on this Al-Qaeda leader and we know where he lives in Yemen and we're going to send a drone after him. Okay, right. We're not going to tell the American people that. But if we are violating the Constitution, there needs to be oversight. And one of the problems we have is that the Foreign Surveillance Court, which is supposed to do oversight for this, all of its members are appointed by a single individual, the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, all of whom therefore support this idea of massive surveillance. And I blame everybody. I blame President Bush, President Obama, I blame the members in Congress. This was a somewhat open secret, but you've got to be transparent because the American people have a right to determine these things. And we can go back to the 60s and 70s and secret wars and so forth. The American people, through their elected members of Congress, have to have oversight. And if I'm elected as Congress, you can be assured I will have tremendous oversight over what our government is doing.
You were saying that people aren't talking about this. What are people talking about?
People are talking mostly, and I've talked with voters in Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County, Falls Church. I hear a lot of people talking about what I've been talking about, student loans, talking about the cost of college, talking about kids coming home, living in their parents' houses, talking about making college affordable again. I hear people talk about federal workers, always the ones that are getting it, and contractors and military veterans, the first to always get it. I hear people talking about the environment, talking about climate change. The Potomac River, I was out in Alexandria just, was it yesterday? Seems like a long time ago. When you're running for office, days. I was out by the Potomac River, near where I live in Alexandria. And there's a beautiful Potomac River. And I can't swim in it. And if you fish in it, don't eat the fish. It's dangerous. And why is that? Because of pollutants that are coming from West Virginia and Pennsylvania and coal companies who aren't paying for the poisons that they put in our rivers when they blow them up. And arsenic, which natural in the ground, is just fine in the ground. I don't want to drink arsenic. We have a phone call on the line?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Should we get to our phone call?
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about what are people talking about. Pat from Fairfax County is calling in.
Great.
Pat, you're on the Inside Scoop.
Hi, Pat.
Hello. I just wanted to say that we need more like you. We need somebody in Congress who's a progressive, who will stand up and give them hell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's great. Someone likes the aggressive progressive. Harry Truman once said, they say I'm giving them hell, but I just tell them the truth and they think it's hell.
You don't have a brother named Pat, do you?
I do not have a brother named Pat. I have no relatives that I know of named Pat. But thank you, Pat. I appreciate your call. Pat, I'll tell you what you can do. Go to my website. I get one little pitch. Go to my website, levineforcongress.com. Volunteer for the campaign. Tell your friends. Go to my Facebook page, my Twitter page. People are just fine. A lot of people have never met me. They don't know who I am. If you like what I say, come support us. I'm not an establishment candidate. I've never held elective office before. I'm not a conventional candidate. I need your help if I'm going to win this race, if we're going to change some things in America. And for the people of the 8th, who, by the way, they also talk about transportation. They talk about where we're going to stage. For example, the FBI building is probably a very good idea where it's put because it's a place where the highways come together. You've got a metro there. as opposed to, say, the BRAC, which came and caused a huge mess with the park. So transportation, I know when I drive in the southern part of the district on 95, I'm always in traffic down there, and Route 1, and so transportation is a big issue for people. But I think the American dream is a big issue for people, whether it's students, retirees, whether it's people getting their pensions, the environment, women's right to choose. What else do people talk about? Immigration, I hear all the issues we've talked about. Actually, the one issue I haven't heard people raise is the NSA. That bothers me. I guess it doesn't bother some other people.
Voting rights, does that come up?
It doesn't come up, but it should.
Right.
Because the right to vote is the right upon which all other rights depend. If we don't have a system whereby every eligible voter can vote, then we have no legitimacy as a representative democracy, as a republic. Look what's happening in Ukraine, right? The reason you have revolution is when you don't have a legitimate government. So the answer is very simple. Every eligible American should be able to vote, period. And when I hear the Republicans talk about, we're afraid people are going to commit fraud, I have a simple solution. You want my simple solution? If you don't have a voter ID with a picture, you go in, and today, with today's phones, you take one right there and then. You take a picture of the voter, you have them sign under penalty of perjury that they are who they say they are, and you let them vote. And if that same picture, that same person votes in 2 places, you prosecute them for perjury and you put them in jail for 5 years. I'm fine with that. It virtually never happens. There's like 5 of those cases in the last 10 years all across the country, and most of those people were mentally ill, frankly. They weren't even trying to commit voter fraud. Very few people, to increase their vote by 1, are willing to risk going to jail for 5 years. But what the Republicans are doing with their voter ID laws is they're not about stopping voter fraud. They're about getting people who don't have voter IDs, which tend to be people who are poor or students who move from state to state, or sometimes the elderly, or don't have a driver's license. We have people in Arlington, in Alexandria, who live near metro stations who don't have a driver's license. You shouldn't have to have you shouldn't have to be able to know how to drive in order to vote. And the answer is really very simple. If they're worried about committing fraud, just take everybody's picture. Same day registration. We've got to let every American vote. It's very important. One other thing. We've got to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. So the Voting Rights Act was the great act of 1965, the act that did more to free African Americans, that and the Civil Rights Act 1964, than any laws since the end of the Civil War. And the Voting Rights Act guaranteed that blacks could vote all across the country, including in Mississippi and Alabama, where they had Jim Crow laws, including in some counties in Virginia, where they weren't allowed to vote. And this was just struck down, the heart of it, Section 4, Section 5 was struck down by the United States Supreme Court in a ridiculous decision a couple of years ago that was completely illogical. I did shows on it. We need to bring that back. This is a law that passed the Senate 98-0, including those senators from Alabama. We need to re-invoke the Voting Rights Act.
Very quickly.
Yeah. I go on at length, I know.
If people like what you're saying tonight, and they want to talk to their friends about you, what message do you want them to give their friends about you?
I want me to tell them that we need an aggressive progressive in Washington. Someone that doesn't just do what I love Nancy Pelosi, but doesn't just do what she says to do, doesn't just do what President Obama says to do, but goes out there because of ideas. Whether it's ideas for ending, getting rid of coal in America, phasing it out, whether it's ideas for expanding Social Security, whether it's ideas for subsidizing student loans again. These are aggressive, progressive ideas that I think the vast majority of Americans support. We just need a Democrat to get up there and tell them so.
It has been a pleasure to talk with Mark Levine tonight, candidate for the U.S. Congress, the 8th Congressional District of Virginia. I'm Jeff Barnett. I will be hosting this show through June 10th.
And hopefully further if I win.
Best of luck to you, Mark.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you.